Welcome. I'm Dr. Mujtaba Moharrir, co-organizer of the Mobility Roundtable. I will be starting the roundtable and introducing the speakers. My guest co-organizer, Dr. Chun Fu from the University of Birmingham in the UK, will guide the Q&A and we will close the session. Mobility and smart cities. Does technology make cities smart? In this roundtable, we will discuss what makes cities smart and how we can prepare for creating sustainable and inclusive future cities. We will now discuss these and other questions over the next hour with our excellent speakers, Mr. Todd Litman, founder and executive director of the Victoria Transport Policy Institute in Canada, Ms. Prachi Vakharia, entrepreneur in transportation and technical program manager at MBTA in Boston, US, and Mr. Adam Cohen, senior research manager at Innovation Mobility Research Group, TSRC, University of California, Berkeley in the United States. So we're going to jump right in with our first speaker, Mr. Todd Litman. Todd, please, the floor is yours. Go ahead and share your screen. Great, thank you.
Yes, greetings to everybody from Victoria, British Columbia. I'm going to be talking about what we call new mobilities. And it's based on my book. Let's see. There we go. My book, The New Mobilities, and I'll send a link if you're interested in more information about it. So there are a number of emerging transportation technologies and services, everything from active and micro modes and bike and car sharing, ride hailing, electric and autonomous vehicles, public transit improvements, air taxis, tunnel roads, pneumatic tube transport, mobility as a service, telework, mobility prioritization, and logistics management. Those are the types of ways that new technologies are affecting transportation. What I emphasize in my research is examining how individuals and communities should evaluate those new technologies and services. What are their costs and benefits? Who is impacted? What is fair? Who should bear their costs and risks? How should we integrate them into our transportation system? Which should be mandated, encouraged, regulated, restricted, or forbidden? So I do a lot of equity analysis. I ask, who benefits? Who's harmed? So for this analysis, I ask for each of the new mobilities, I ask, does it help people with disabilities get around? Does it ensure that everybody receives a fair share of public resources? Does it increase affordability and help low-income people? Does it reduce the external costs that traffic congestion, accident risk, and pollution that are imposed on other people? And one of the points that I make is that many of the new mobilities, or some of the new mobilities, increase those external costs. They tend to increase congestion risk, infrastructure costs, or pollution, where others can reduce it. Those are the kind of the ways that we need to look at this. So in my book, I develop a rating system. I ask for each of those new mobilities, does it support or contradict 12 community planning objectives? And what I find is the simple improvements, things like improving walking and micro modes and public transit improvements, transportation prioritization, mobility as a service, vehicle sharing, those tend to provide the greatest total benefits. They support the greatest range of planning goals, where some of the more glamorous innovations, the things that we hear about a lot, such as autonomous vehicles and tunnel roads and hyperloops and flying cars, air taxis they're called, those tend to provide, they are more expensive, they're more resource intensive, and so their benefits tend to be smaller. So here are my conclusions. Vehicle innovations tend to be implemented more slowly than other technologies because vehicles are expensive and have significant safety risks and external impacts. and its fleets turn over. It usually takes 15 to 20 years for a fleet to turn over. So even if some of these electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles represent half of new vehicles sold by 2030, which is very optimistic, it would be 2045 or 2050 before the majority of vehicles in the fleet have those capabilities. Most vehicle innovations are initially costly and imperfect. It often takes several generations to optimize the new technologies. For example, automatic transmissions were available first in the 1940s, but it was the 1970s before they were reliable, and the 1980s before they were standard on most new vehicles. And predictions that autonomous electric taxis will soon be cheap and ubiquitous are mostly made by people with financial interests in the industry. There are good reasons to be skeptical. There's considerable uncertainty about the new mobility's benefits, costs, and travel impacts. Advocates often exaggerate the net benefits by ignoring some of the costs and the rebound effects, the tendency of electric and self-driving cars to increase total vehicle travel, and the harms that this imposes on other people. Some new mobility support and others contradict our social equity goals. Many potential benefits depend on how new mobilities are implemented, regulated, and priced. The most glamorous modes are not necessarily the most useful, beneficial, or fun. Just to give you an example, imagine what it'll actually be like to travel by Hyperloop. You'll be locked in a capsule with several other people that accelerate so fast that some people, accelerates and decelerates so fast, some people will be nauseous. Is that really going to be, and there will be no windows, it has to be enclosed. Is that really going to be a pleasant experience? Total benefits tend to be greatest for the affordable, resource-efficient modes. Expensive, resource-intensive modes tend to provide smaller benefits, greater risks, and more inequity. So that was a very quick summary of my research. I'm going to add some links to some of my reports on this in the chat box. I'm looking forward to discussing this with my colleagues here.
Excellent, Todd. Thank you very much. Yes, we have a bit to talk about in the Q&A. Our next speaker is Ms. Prachi Vakharia. Prachi, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mustafa. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, based on where you are. When Mustafa first approached me to talk about smart cities, it's reminded me of this incident many years ago. I was working at an MIT Media Lab in the Smart Cities group, and I was doing a presentation, and I met some people at the White House Chamber of Commerce, and they came to me and they asked me, what are you doing? What are you working on? So I said, yeah, I'm working on smart cities. They immediately said, yes, of course, we don't need any more dumb cities. We have Baltimore for that. But beyond Baltimore, I think it's a really sincere question of what is a smart city? What is a dumb city? And hopefully when I talk of automation at the end of this talk, you're able to answer this question yourself. So let me tell you a bit more of automation. Before I get started, I should tell you my daily job. I work with the MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the oldest transit agency in the country. And along with that, I advise and mentor a few different companies. And currently I serve as an advisor for Safe AI, and I worked with them in the past on safety protocols as well. So what does Safe AI do? I'm sure some of you have seen at least videos of these trucks, if not in person. This is about a 250, 400-ton truck. And if this was automated, it would not have run over that car. So what Safe AI does is it automates heavy equipment. So any kind of mining equipment. Let me find a way to get to the next slide here. There we go. So what Safe AI does is puts a retrofit solution on top of huge trucks, like what you find in mining areas, construction sites, dozers, rollers, any kind of heavy equipment. And the way we do that is we use a bunch of sensors. So I'm sure you're seeing, if you've ever seen a Waymo car or any sort of automated vehicle, you see it's outfitted with already tens and tens of sensors inside it. Even your average car today has at least a few cameras. The way Safe AI and the way we do it is, first is attach a lot of cameras in and around the vehicle. Cameras and especially computer vision, which is using the input from cameras, but machine learning at the top and some of the advances we've made allows computer vision today to really accurately detect objects that may be in the path, so do obstacle detection, be able to do a 3D mapping of the area that's surrounding any vehicle. Similarly, LiDARs and radars are also very important to understand other objects around the area, but also the speeds at which they are moving. And of course, then you have a drive-by-wire system. You need very good processors on any vehicle to take all of these information that's coming in and compute it. But this is what most automated vehicles today will have. It will have some kind of sensor and computing kit. All right, what SafeAI does, it takes any kind of truck made by Caterpillar, Bobcats, Komatsu, Hitachi, so many of these OEMs, retrofits them with these sensors, and we are deployed at various mining sites. I'm going to share with you one more video. So this is a dozer, and again, with the advances of automation, we've been able to accurately detect the amount of material that is front of the dozer, how much it needs to lift up, and where it needs to take that material and dump it. So complete an entire cycle that a human would have done otherwise. And why are we doing that? It's a very important question. Why is automation there in the mining sector today? For mining, there are clear benefits. Mining, construction, and possibly other industries too. We see a huge reduction in costs. Mines today are getting more and more remote. Like in Western Australia, these mines are so remote, there are no towns, no people anywhere around it. And the fly-in, fly-out costs are really high. Same with North Dakota. When I was speaking to certain mines there, their unemployment rate is about 1%, which means they really have a shortage of labor, right? Very few people living and working there, which means if they can automate some of their vehicles, we definitely add to their productivity. And of course, the safety argument. I mean, there are multiple layers of protection that any vehicle has in a mine, especially with a vehicle being able to communicate with other vehicles, the vehicle being able to communicate with an operator, the vehicle being able to communicate with the control room as well. But safety is a big factor. If you can improve safety at a mine, or any construction site, these are huge improvements for the entire industry. All right, and I should say this, and this is where I'm getting at, but automation is not the only thing happening at a mine. A mine of the future is seeing so many new technologies being introduced to it. First is using AI to understand how do we improve our operations, how do we improve our efficiency. Usage of drones is getting bigger and bigger as well for all kinds of users, especially for mapping of areas as well, or for doing site assessments. Hydrogen fuel cells, so they're trying to make these trucks, which are typically hybrid today, they're trying to make them run on hydrogen fuel cells. Connectivity is ubiquitous at mines as well today, where again, the vehicles are talking to the operators, they're talking to the control rooms, and really everything at a mine is interconnected. So these are some of the trends. Oh, one more is digital twinning, which I think a lot of you may have heard of as well, where you create kind of simulation, but a real-time simulation of exactly how a machine or a factory, or in this case, equipment is operating. So you can then predict when it's going to break down, if there are any operations or maintenance issues that may arise in the future. So all these exciting technologies, and automation then is a part of it. So now let's bring this back to cities, right? If you think of heavy industry, like what I just mentioned, there are a few 10,000 vehicles around the world, but passenger vehicles, what you and I drive every day, there's about 1.2 billion vehicles in the world today. So there's a lot of different vehicles, and this is why a lot of companies are trying to innovate in the space as well, because this is where the big money is. But let's really think through automation and what this means. I want to tell you a few things. One is these SAE levels, which I think many of you may be familiar with, level 1 and level 0 being not very automated, level 5 being fully automated. The evolutionary approach is what most of the OEMs today are taking, the automakers like your Audis, your Teslas, etc., where they're saying, yes, we are really good at level 1, level 2, level 3 technologies, where you roll out advanced driver assist services, so ADAS systems out for the drivers. So slowly things like lane keeping, AEB, etc. This is what these companies are rolling out. And then you have companies like Waymo, which is saying, no, forget all this. We want to go fully automated, and they're aiming for the level 5. Again, not everything is clear-cut because we are seeing production goes across the different levels. There's no like only level 2 car or only level 3 car. So their production is happening across the board. Something else to think about when we think of automation, going back to what Todd described as well, what is really the value of automation? Most scenarios when cities think of how our automated vehicles going to hit our streets, what's going to be the impact on traffic, they're really assuming that, initially with automation and like I said, with the driver assist services, we will see a decrease in congestion. But when you move towards a fully automated vehicle, the cost of being in the car is negligible. One is not driving it. One can have, I could be on my phone, I could have conference calls, I could be reading a book, do all these kind of activities while the car is driving itself. So the cost of driving then for the individual was really low. And that means I could be living 2 hours away and I wouldn't mind commuting in because, well, I'm not driving. I can use those hours as productive hours. So this is why we're also estimating that congestion will go up when we have all automated vehicles on the street. Something else to think about as well is when we talk of automated vehicles, we should also possibly consider connected vehicles as well. This is another big trend in the industry where vehicles are talking to each other, they're talking with the infrastructure next to it, they could be talking to pedestrians as well. It's all the V2X technologies. And this is something important to think about as well, because as we see, like I said, with automated vehicles, congestion can increase. With connected automated vehicles, there's a chance that congestion can be decreased. What you have is shorter headways between the different vehicles and that allows for platooning because they're communicating intent with each other. Or even with lane merging, it can happen much smoother if the vehicles know where other vehicles are and they could talk to each other. So there are real benefits of connected vehicles, which has a better impact on traffic management than only automated vehicles. So this is where I want to leave you with today is, what makes a city smart? Is it just a smart driving car, a car that's only by itself intelligent, looking what's around it and driving and just making decisions for itself? Or do we think of it in a more network approach where cars are talking to each other, to the infrastructure? And also, who are these cars serving as well? If you think of anything from a personal car to something like an on-demand mobility service, like call you Uber and the Uber comes in front of you, an automated Uber comes in front of you, or any kind of paratransit fleet service, who is it really serving? And why are some of the questions we need to be asking? Now, there's an old saying that to shoot a moving target, you have to be ahead of it. And like I said, passenger automation is still a few years away. So now is the time to ask the questions that Todd did earlier, but really ask, who are we building this technology for? Whom does it serve? And how should we manage it so it can serve the most people as well as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Prachi. Good, we have a lot to talk about in the discussion. I invite our third and final speaker to start, Mr. Adam Cohen. Adam, please.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, today I'm going to talk briefly about a study that we did with the Mineta Transportation Institute. For those that don't know me, I'm a research manager over at UC Berkeley and a senior researcher at the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. And our research really focuses on smart cities and innovative and emerging transportation technologies, such as advanced air mobility, automated vehicles, shared mobility, micromobility, and other technologies. So as kind of part of this study, we've engaged a number of different activities really to kind of develop a framework that cities and regions can use to really kind of understand what is a smart city, how to replicate it, kind of what is the role of pilot and evaluations as part of smart cities, and kind of understanding the role of kind of other emerging issues. I'll briefly kind of share some of these findings today. So a little bit kind of about the study methods that we employed as part of this study. We did a fairly extensive literature review of smart cities, conducted a number of expert interviews. We also conducted some deep dive assessments, excuse me, to kind of look at smart cities, and then develop this framework. And as part of this, we partnered closely with the Texas Innovation Alliance and the Smart Cities Lab. And they kind of conducted these engagements with 21 cities and communities to really kind of identify kind of a process for kind of I've got a figure that will show up, but really kind of this engagement process, kind of group learning. So this kind of figure kind of really depicts kind of this design thinking process that they employed as part of this research. And really kind of was about getting together cities and regions with similar problems and to kind of co-create strategies to overcome these challenges. And so through this iterative process of design thinking where you can understand, explore, and kind of materialize a strategy to overcome these challenges. And again, in a more detailed way, really kind of defining a problem with kind of an ideation process, testing strategies, and then implementing them. So what did our research really show? First of all, what a smart city is. What we found is that really kind of a smart city is kind of more broadly, not necessarily a city, but really kind of this ecosystem of pilots, innovations, and stakeholders that work together at a variety of local, city, and regional scales to come together to overcome these strategies. It also includes kind of 7 key domains. Everything from transportation, which is how we commonly talk about it, but also innovations in energy and environment, governments, workforce development, kind of culture and living, economy, and then connections in terms of digital connectivity. What we found from our research really is that a smart city isn't so much a city itself, but really kind of smart regions. And that there's really kind of this pyramid of collaboration that really kind of occurs. And so, smart cities kind of start with kind of individual innovation and then kind of start to permeate through kind of departments and kind of multiple departments. But really, in order to become kind of a smart city or better term, a smart region, you really have to have cross collaboration across public agencies, across departments, and across stakeholders. And then it's really kind of the sum of these different innovators that can really kind of create this, and that you can't outsource innovation. And so I guess in summary, we kind of really describe it as kind of this pyramid of innovation.
Adam, I'm sorry, I think if you turn your camera off, maybe your voice comes better because your voice is cutting.
Oh, okay, is that better?
It's better, yes, thank you.
Yes, sorry. Bandwidth issues this morning. So just to recap, in case nobody heard quite what I was saying on the last slide. So just really kind of the smart city is more about this kind of pyramid of collaboration, and you really kind of attain this at a very high level, most effective level, when you have this cross-collaborative collaboration across stakeholders, public agencies at a regional level. The final thing I'll say that our research really showed is that there's really a typology of smart cities or regions. And this figure really depicts this. There were kind of tech-oriented cities and regions that were really kind of driven through innovation, but also had a lot of challenges related to affordability and cost of living. There were those that were kind of economic revival cities and regions. These are ones that were slow to respond to macro changes and are starting to use technology to kind of reinvent themselves. There are growth cities and regions in North America. These are predominantly in the southern US. And these are cities that are growing both economically, population-wise, and spatially, and they're using smart cities to really kind of manage kind of their growth. And then there were kind of small and rural communities that are becoming quote-unquote smart cities because they're using it to kind of create placemaking and to kind of retain talent locally versus having people leave and go to larger cities. So with that being said, I'll kind of conclude there. We really kind of want to thank you for the invitation to speak and look forward to kind of our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam, Todd, Prachi. It was great. We already have some questions and question and answers in the chat area. But before we move to the questions, I'd like to invite Todd, Adam, and Prachi that if you have any questions from each other to please go ahead and ask it. Who wants? Todd, do you want to go first? You were the first speaker if you have any.
Sure. Now, I'm gonna raise something controversial, and I certainly don't want this to sound overly critical, but Prachi, your research focuses on industrial uses, and that's really not about cities. That's mainly about resource extraction from what I see. So I mean, that's fine, it's great. I certainly support the use of technologies to reduce risks, increase efficiency for resource uses. I think it's striking that those are the uses that have the least unexpected impacts. It's not affecting where people live or how they interact. And that's what cities are really about. So to what degree do the technologies that you're talking about actually apply specifically in cities?
Yeah. Good question. So I'm looking at it from the execution perspective, practitioner's perspective. I'm not doing research, to be clear. Also, if you were paying attention in my class, you would have said, I'm drawing an analogy because at a mining environment itself, we don't stop, sorry, this is now breaking, but we don't stop at just automation. We are looking at an interconnected mine with using multiple technologies to make the mine more efficient. And similarly, that's the kind of practice and thinking we should use for smart cities as well. We can have as much 4G or 5G that we like, but if people are not talking to each other, as data is not connected, if vehicles are not talking to each other, then it's not really smart. And it's through this communication that we could optimize and meet some of the goals that we need. Is it better communication between vehicles? Is it fewer pedestrian traffic, better warning systems? All of this comes through interconnectedness. My point with automation is we do not have to stop at automation. We need connectivity as well to support smarter cities. Hope that answered the question, Todd.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Prachi, while you're talking, if you have any questions from Todd or Adam, please go ahead.
No, I think I'm actually curious to learn about the audience's questions and see what kind of thoughts and ideas they have as well. Okay.
Adam, what about you? Do you have any questions from Todd or Prachi?
No, I mean, I like Prachi, I'm kind of curious of kind of the audience questions as well.
So before we move to audience, I'm going to be selfish and ask my own question first. And I talk. We're in another roundtable. We're talking with one of the researchers at Graduate School of Design here, and we said that we talk about smart cities. That the cities are smart. They don't need the technology. They don't need the technology to become smart. Yes, we can use that to utilize, to improve the mobility or anything. But so I want to build on that and say, and also build on what some of the data that Todd showed. Introduction of technology, could it not cause the cities to be, as Prachi said, dumber, if we don't really create that, we don't consider the reality of cities that are built over, in cases, thousands of years, at least hundreds of years. What are your thoughts on that, introducing the technology and thinking just technology can make cities smart?
Well, yeah, I mean, our research really kind of definitively shows that technology doesn't necessarily make a city smart, that it's really about innovation and not about the technology. And that it's about openness to innovate processes, to foster new ideas, new policies, and that technology can be a piece of that. But I think the term smart cities has really been, I think, kind of misused and really kind of twisted for the private sector purpose of selling products and services that are technology oriented, but that doesn't really make a city smart.
Yeah, let me just add to Adam's point, if I may, is Most technologies go through hype cycles. So again, 10 years ago, smart cities was the big hype. Now it's slowed down. We saw a lot of failures coming from companies as well. These big tech companies promised a lot to these cities. They signed huge contracts, delivered on nothing, and cities were disappointed. So this is where I think, getting over these hype cycles and really looking at the core of technology is important. The second point I want to make is cities today are getting smart, I think. That I mean city officials are getting smart. So we had the Uber and Lyft wave come in about 2010s across different US cities. 5 years later, we had micromobility, and the response time and how cities have responded to them has been totally different. They were not prepared for Uber and Lyft on their streets. But today, if there's a new technology getting introduced, cities are better equipped to be asking questions, to be regulating them. Even with the micromobility services, I saw City of DC take a very proactive approach and saying, okay, this is where we need vehicles. This is where the vehicles should be positioned, because these are transit deserts where there's no other form of transportation. So you really need to position yourself here. This is the data you need to share with us so we can understand how people are moving, how people are traveling around the city. And this is how we require you to keep these devices safe, getting them out of the way of pedestrians as well. So technology is not the end solution, but if we manage technology well, it can certainly serve our purposes. So the larger question to ask is, for any city is, what kind of city do we want to be?
Perfect. Thank you both. So we'll hand over to Chan to ask the questions. And Todd, sorry, your responses to Daniel came directly to me. So if you could send them again and reply to all, that would be great. Thank you. Chan, please, yours.
So before we move on, Todd, do you have any words to add to reply Daniel's question?
Yes. Well, maybe we need to recognize that the term smart is whatever anybody wants it to mean, right? It's a great term. I use it all the time, but it's manipulative because it supports what we want. Perhaps a better term when we're talking about cities is efficient. That is, they're the activities and services that maximize the benefits, the net benefits, minimize costs, maximize benefits to society. So in my experience, what cities need are not necessarily new technologies. They need things like efficient road and parking pricing. They need to be able to manage their curbs and their lanes and roads to favor the resource efficient modes. They need to reform development policies so anybody who wants, any household that wants, including those with low incomes, can find suitable housing in a walkable, transit-friendly neighborhood. Those are the things that urban planners emphasize, really deliver efficiencies and benefits. And to the degree that technologies support them, that's great. For example, new pricing systems make it much easier to charge for road and parking pricing, charge efficient prices for roads and parking facilities. New communications technologies can make it much easier for people to do things without physical travel. Those are all great, but I think there's a danger that we assume that newer is better and technology necessarily provides solutions, ignoring the great costs that are imposed. One of the reports I wrote called Our Accelerated World, it looked at how transportation innovations over the last century affect our household economies. It turns out in 1900, nobody owned a car, and transportation costs were an insignificant portion of household budgets. By 2020, most households own cars, and they're devoting 20% of their household budgets to their vehicles and parking for their vehicles. So yeah, we got more mobility, but we had these huge increase in costs. And for many households, especially low-income households, you could say they are worse off. So I think that there is a need to be able to put all this stuff together and favor the technologies and innovations that really increase efficiency and things like affordability, and not get too excited about the technology as an end in itself.
Thank you, Todd. We've got a question from Chris Mean, who's from Smart City Infrastructure Startup in Portland, Oregon, and is curious as all these mobility objects, cars, micromobility, and more, are getting connected as time goes by. So the question is, what kind of infrastructure for city municipalities to act swiftly to these rapid changes? How should cities need to prepare? I think this is a question for all the panelists. Who would like to go first?
Maybe Adam can go first.
Sure. You know, what I'll say is that this is an unresolved issue. I think it's a really complex one. You know, and just to highlight some of the complexities around this, you know, we do a lot of work not only in automated vehicles, but also advanced air mobility. And so all these technologies are competing for really the same spectrum, which is, you know, a limited public resource. And we have to really kind of, you know, view it as a limited public resource and kind of manage it. So there's not only a need to kind of exchange data across modes, but determine who will manage and aggregate and protect that data. And there's some differing opinions on this. I know there's a number of cities that would like to have it open access and or be the ones to manage it themselves. I can tell you in kind of the advanced air mobility kind of space, the Federal Aviation Administration is leaning heavily to what they call providers of services of urban air mobility, basically privatizing data management for air taxis. So there's a lot of different models here, and this is yet to be resolved.
Absolutely. I think a larger framework is needed for cities. A question is, do cities have capacity to regulate these companies and technologies well? Is a question to ask internally. And externally, the questions are, what is our framework and requirements for data gathering, for safety? What kind of expectations do we have, be it from a micromobility scooter or be it from an automated vehicle? Third is equity, of course. And I think equity and access really tied together is how do we provide transportation that's environmentally efficient to as many people as possible, but especially in areas that are not served already. So those are some key components that I think need to be resolved, goals set for, and then again, technologies can help meet those goals.
And Todd?
Yes, so I'm just posting in the chat box 3 examples of some great reports, some great studies that are done by 3 governments, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Denver, to prepare for the new mobilities. So these are examples of the kind of thinking that cities are doing. Basically, what the researchers I work with point out is that especially electric and autonomous vehicles and things like air taxis are likely, if left to themselves, well, and even starting with ride hailing. So Uber and Lyft are already causing increases in traffic congestion in many cities. And if they have electric vehicles, which have half the operating costs, and so that encourages people to drive more. And if you have autonomous vehicles, you'll have even more increases in vehicle travel. Cities should be prepared to implement transportation demand management. They have to start limiting vehicle travel and efficiently manage road space and curb space. So that's what these studies are doing. That's what this discussion among urban planners is all about, is how to avoid this potentially huge increase in vehicle travel. Let me just give a real quick example.
Todd, please give a very quick example so we have quite a few questions. Please go ahead.
Parking is priced but roads are free, when you have your self-driving car drive you to work, you're going to program it either to drive home and park there, or just to circle the block for hours so that you're avoiding paying for parking. So unless we price roads efficiently, autonomous vehicles could cause huge increases in total vehicle travel and therefore congestion and accidents and air pollution.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We can see the room is getting very busy and so many people are hands up. But I've got the first question from Abhinav, I hope I pronounced correctly, from Monash University, Melbourne. So this question is for Prachi. The question is, will the autonomous vehicles need a smart infrastructures like smart roads? Any insights about it?
Yes, absolutely. So this is where I'm a bit bearish on automated vehicles. Again, having all these sensors, sensing what's in its environment, computing that, and then making decisions for itself, it's very computationally intensive. And now you have companies like WeRide coming from China, which are saying, you know, with 5G, we see that our average speed of an automated vehicle can really improve because we are speaking to other vehicles. We are doing a better job at leveraging the entire smart road or smart city network, if you want, and then move at faster speeds. So again, this is my personal perspective, but I think what I'm seeing in the mine area, definitely connectivity is incredibly important to get us to automation. And I suspect if you want automation on our streets faster, connectivity is very important on our streets as well.
Chan, I'm going to interrupt and ask Gail to also ask the question. She had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, that's really kind of you. Thank you. I just was respectful of the fact that there's quite a few of us here. My question is coming from a context of Vancouver. And yeah, I'm curious about how, I was talking with someone the other day and they were saying, oh, you know, such and such a city in North America has 3 new electric buses. And I immediately thought they need, 3,000 or 300 to 3,000, order is different. And so I think what my question is that it appears to me the bigger challenges have to do with the culture and the systems that we're caught in terms of lock-in for single occupancy vehicles. And I don't even see it to be necessarily a behavioral change issue as much as there not being an adequate comparable system. If we lower the amount of cars on the road, whether they're automated or not, we don't have something comparable in North America in most cities that can replace that. And so even when it comes down to what Todd was saying around road pricing or mobility pricing, how can that be realistic when there isn't a viable transit option? So I think my question is, what would be a skillful alignment of technology with the social and systems change, and what could be some exemplar case studies in North America? Because usually what I'm seeing is comparisons to Europe, but it's a completely different situation there in terms of transit having a culture and a system that's been heavily invested in. So what kinds of exemplar cities have this, not so much smart cities, but smart alignment of that technology with social and cultural and systems change work?
Thank you, Gail. Adam and then Todd, but please keep your responses short so we can get to more.
Sure. I think you bring up a really great point that the US and Canada are not Europe. And I think a lot of the confusion centers around mobility as a service. And this really kind of gets down to what the US DOT has talked about with mobility on demand. In North America, you need to remember that a multimodal trip can have multiple modes, but not necessarily include transit. And that's just like a reality of kind of the built environment that we need to respond to. So I think really at a very high level, what we need to be focused on is what we can do with the built environment, and either encouraging density and encouraging walkability. And if that's not possible because of how the roads are designed, particularly in various urban areas where creating a grid is going to be challenging, then I think we need to explore other design and policy strategies to be able to, overcome that. And so this could be a much longer conversation, so I'll leave it kind of at that.
Yeah, well, I'll respectfully disagree. Just to put this into context, I live in North America, and our family has been car-free for the last decade, and it's because we live in one of the older neighborhoods. It's very walkable and very mixed. And North America is full of that, and Vancouver in particular is full of that. The exemplar that I would offer is Montreal, one of our other Canadian cities. Montreal is the most European of North American cities because it does have very walkable and transit-friendly neighborhoods. It's not about the technology of the transit. I think electrifying buses is great, but it is important to put that into perspective. The first generation of electric buses were not very successful. The technology is just now being optimized. And so it is understandable that transit agencies are not, are not switching over totally right away, that we are still in the learning phase. But keep in mind, buses, somebody who relies on walking and bicycling and buses reduces their traffic congestion and accident risk and pollution emissions that they impose on their community by an order of magnitude. So it doesn't matter so much whether the bus is diesel or electric or hydrogen. What does matter is that people people have the opportunity to choose a low vehicle travel lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And that is what we lack is not the technology, it's the incentive. So for example, almost every city, including Vancouver, has although it's about to change, has minimum parking requirements. We're forced to subsidize this very expensive asset called a parking space, regardless of whether we or not we want it. That is we call it a fertility drug for cars. Same with road space. Highway departments are...
Sorry, Todd, I'm going to interrupt you. And actually, I'm really enjoying it because this is what I also believe personally in terms of creating the solution is not necessarily the problem, but the inclusion is. Prachi, if you could keep it short, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, yes, definitely very short. BEVs are a problem because especially in colder climates, the battery efficiency goes down quite a bit. The range is not so high. So as Todd mentioned, transit agencies are slowly rolling them out. In terms of model cities, again, I think congestion pricing, using pricing as a mechanism is really, really effective. And what we see in cities like London too, right, which has a huge suburbia, is still that you have an area that you cordon off and have cordon pricing. So I think using incentives, transit, bike share, just creating more opportunities. And on the other hand, the sticks like pricing work really well to change how some cities are shaped.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Chan,
I see my question.
Thank you. Chan, shall we go to Daniel or do you have a question in text?
I think the next question may from Stephen Harper, please.
So he can go ahead and ask, please.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Steve Harper. We all talk about the smart city. Actually, what we need is smarter humans. The need we have to travel to somewhere. Why do we do it? The smarter human should think, why do I need to do that? Where do I need to be? And how do I need to do it? Is the solution to give all the funds to these giant corporations like the Amazons that deliver everything to your door? That's not equality because only the big corporations are getting rich. And we will become, especially in the US, very reliant on cars. I am a car designer, right? And I understand that we like to buy a car because we can put the family in there, we can put all the dogs, the luggage, the golf clubs, and have the engine up front, etc., etc. But actually, what we need is personal transport. Now, if you rethink the car, not public transport. I mean, public transport's fine if you want to catch COVID, right? But what we actually want is to be in our own little test tubes driving down the road, going around, and then therefore we only take up a 1 meter squared than 15 meters squared of a typical car. This is perhaps more of the solutions which we should be looking forward to. It's not how to make the cities smarter, but how to make the humans smarter, and the things that they have to use, surely those would be the way to approach it. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. I don't think that was a question, and I enjoyed
it. It was the others. Do you think we need to make the humans smarter?
That's okay. Please, quick, if anybody would like to address that.
I don't know if anyone has the answer to how to make humans smarter. Stephen, sorry, we give up. Look, I think we live in such a reactionary society as well, right? Like, we watch so much content online, and it's always like, subscribe, comment after watching a YouTube or TikTok video. It's never think about it. Let's discuss. And the same with a lot of transportation as well. We're all just consuming what's thrown at us. And this is where I think better management of systems, better, smarter thinking, and possibly even with the threat of climate change, we can really start thinking of how do we focus on environmental efficiency, not personal efficiency, from getting from A to B.
Perfect, thank you. Chan, do we have any other questions from the text before I move to Daniel?
Yes, we have a question from Fiona Cranford. So the question is, are data protection regulations likely to be a barrier to having fully connected systems? Asking from a British perspective. Anyone would like to
Adam, go first? You're leaving us shortly. Adam, do you like to comment on that?
I'm gonna take a pass on that one if it's okay. Unfortunately, I'll let you guys continue with the conversation. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to drop off momentarily to teach a class, but it's been a really great opportunity to be able to join everyone today.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Todd, please.
Todd, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, frankly, I don't think we can create smarter humans, but I think we can create much more efficient systems that provide...
Sorry, Todd, sorry to interrupt you. So the question is, are data protection regulations likely to be a barrier to having fully connected systems from a British perspective?
Sure, that's a technical question. I'm not a autonomous or a connected vehicle engineer, so I'm more of a planner, so you'll have to turn that over to somebody that specializes in the technology.
Yeah, I might be able to answer that very high level. It's definitely concerning who owns the data from an automated car, because think of it, right? The car is not just something that the OEM owns today. You may have a Waymo kit running on top, or you may have sensors coming from different companies running on top, collecting data at any different point. So who owns that data is a very, very important question. And again, personally, I would think, okay, the consumer should own the data, but that's not where the industry is going. So there's a big fight going between the OEMs and then the OEM suppliers, the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers currently on who should own the data, because whoever owns the data can really own the market too. Much more advances in their products can be made. There's just plenty of benefits, even with the insurance companies, just plenty of benefits for owning this data. So this is in transit, and this is something that the industry is fighting over today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Daniel, would like to ask?
Great, thank you. So my question follows Stephen's comment and Todd's comments earlier. So I think smart and more technology is often conflated with advancement in terms of efficiency, in terms of equity, and in terms of sustainability, in providing accessibility overall. And I think we have all the technology we need. What we need is better decision making, favoring active modes in public transport over personal cars. So the sort of 24-lane extension to a 22-lane road is not the solution. But so I'd like to propose maybe for discussion that shared autonomous taxis, sort of in the line what Todd said about Uber and Lyft earlier, might just be a transition technology towards high occupancy public transport, which is a solution that we already know.
Sure. Let me respond that we call it microtransit, and there is a vision, but you face, regardless of what exactly how that is provided, you still need to overcome those additional steps that are required. If you have your car in your driveway, so if this average household owns a car and it's in their driveway, there's almost no incentive to leave that car at home and shift to a more resource efficient mode unless we implement new policies. With current policies, the microtransit gets stuck in congestion the same way as your personal car. There's no incentive, and in order for this whole system to work, we need to rethink the incentives and the priorities and really reward people for reducing their personal vehicle travel. Let me send you a link to the, there's a whole movement called Shared Mobility for Smart Cities.
Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Prachi, do you want to also say your last thought of anything you would like to say, either the question or anything else you would like to say, so we can wrap up?
Are we wrapping up the panel?
Yeah. Yes, this is the last question. This is the last chance if you want to say anything.
Yes, okay. Well, nothing to add, but I think, great questions from all of you. Thank you for asking the questions. And really fundamentally, right, what is the value of technology and how can we use these advances to our purposes for our goals, larger societal goals, environmental goals, city goals, efficiency goals, all of those. So I think that's exactly the right question to ask. And thank you so much for this lively discussion.
Perfect, thank you. Todd, do you have any final thoughts?
I think I've said enough.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to see all the familiar faces and the new faces. Great talk. Thank you, Todd, Prachi, and Chiang for your time. And our next roundtable will be on the 18th of November, always third Thursday of the month, on mobility and prosperity. I will be sending the email out, especially when this recording is available. Thanks, everyone. It was great. It was great. Thank you.